Russia wants the world to believe it's winning the war in Ukraine. Every speech, every broadcast, every headline pushed through its tightly controlled media system is crafted to reinforce that illusion. That the Russian army is advancing, that Ukraine is collapsing, and that victory is just around the corner. But the truth tells a very different story. Only days ago, Moscow's propaganda machine released what it called a major battlefield triumph, complete with dramatic footage of Russian troops storming a Ukrainian island. The operation was supposedly bold and decisive, a symbol that Russia's military still had the upper hand. The footage spread rapidly across Russian telegram channels and state media outlets. It showed soldiers crossing the Dnipro River under fire, planting flags on the rubble and raising their rifles in victory. A narrator with a deep, patriotic tone declared that Russia had reclaimed control of Karantin Island near Kherson city. For a moment, the narrative worked. Thousands shared the video online, believing that the tide of war had finally turned. But within hours, the story unraveled. Ukraine released its own footage, geolocated, time-stamped, and verified, showing Ukrainian troops calmly patrolling the same island, completely unchallenged. The fierce firefight Russia had shown was nowhere to be found. The supposed Russian presence on the island? Fabricated. What was presented as a victory turned out to be a digital illusion, a film production designed to fool not only the world, but Russia's own citizens. This wasn't a small mistake or a misunderstanding. It was a carefully staged piece of propaganda meant to project strength at a time when the Kremlin has little left to show. For years, Vladimir Putin's government has relied on tightly edited videos and exaggerated claims to maintain the illusion of control. But this time, Ukraine's swift and undeniable proof shattered that illusion in full view of the global audience. Behind the fake footage lies a deeper truth. Russia's war machine is no longer defined by real victories, but by psychological ones. With its economy crumbling, casualties soaring, and battlefield progress grinding to a halt, Moscow has turned to fiction as its most powerful weapon. The Karantin Island hoax isn't just a story of lies, it's a symbol of desperation. And as this investigation unfolds, we'll uncover exactly how this fabricated victory was orchestrated, how Ukraine exposed it, and what it reveals about the true state of Putin's war. Because in a conflict built on deception, one thing remains certain. Russia can fake the footage, it can edit the sound, it can broadcast the illusion of dominance, but it can't fake reality forever. It all began on the morning of October 22nd, when Vladimir Saldo, the Russian-installed head of the occupied Kherson region, uploaded a dramatic video to his official Telegram channel. The footage was perfectly edited, intense music, quick cuts, and soldiers shouting orders as they stormed through murky riverbanks. Russian troops could be seen paddling across the Dnipro River in inflatable boats, while others exchanged gunfire and eventually planted a Russian flag into a pile of shattered debris. To the untrained eye, it looked convincing, a daring amphibious assault that had reclaimed the small but strategic Karantin Island located just southwest of Kherson city. Saldo's caption made the claim even bolder. Russian airborne and reconnaissance units have crossed the river, repelled enemy attacks, and are fortifying their new positions. Within hours, Russian state media like TASS and RIA Novosti echoed his words. Headlines screamed of victory. Russian forces secure key island in the Dnipro, preparing for advance on Kherson. Telegram war bloggers joined in, praising the heroic crossing of the 31st VDV Brigade and the precision strikes of the 18th Combined Arms Army. Across Russia's tightly controlled media ecosystem, the message was unified. This was a turning point in the war. But the cracks began to show almost immediately. The video, when examined closely, had inconsistencies. The lighting and weather conditions didn't match real-time satellite data for that morning. The sound of gunfire was looped in several parts. And in one frame, viewers noticed the same soldier appearing in two different camera angles at once, suggesting staged sequences filmed over multiple takes. Independent analysts started to question the footage's authenticity, but Russian channels continued pushing the story, desperate to drown out any doubt. The Kherson Island hoax wasn't an isolated stunt. It was part of a much larger psychological operation, one meticulously engineered by Russia's state propaganda network to shape perception rather than reality. When the Ukrainian counteroffensive began pushing deep into Zaporizhzhia and the Dnipro front started crumbling, Moscow's inner circle understood something terrifying. The illusion of control was slipping away. Every battlefield loss risked sparking public unrest, eroding faith in Putin's leadership, and destabilizing an already fragile war economy. The solution wasn't more tanks or missiles, it was a narrative victory. Inside Russia's Ministry of Defense building in Moscow, The Department of Information Operations had been quietly restructured months earlier. Military briefings were no longer just about troop movements or ammunition stockpiles, they were about media optics. A retired colonel turned Kremlin propagandist, Igor Konashenkov, became the face of these fabrications, delivering daily operational updates that blurred fact and fiction. To millions of Russians watching at home, these updates became the only version of the war that mattered. By the morning of October 24th, the illusion was collapsing faster than Russia's media machine could contain it. While state TV anchors in Moscow still celebrated the heroic capture of Karantin Island, Ukrainian and Western intelligence agencies were already dissecting the operation frame by frame. The first blow came from open-source investigators on X, formerly Twitter, and Telegram, the very platforms the Kremlin had long tried to suppress. Analysts from GeoConfirmed, Deep State Map, and OSINT Technical began geolocating the supposed battle scenes. Using cloud patterns, tree-line angles, and thermal satellite overlays, they confirmed something devastating. The Russian victory footage wasn't filmed on Karantin Island at all. The coordinates matched a completely different location, an abandoned river crossing site near Oleshki, over 20 kilometers away. The soldiers in the video were never in Ukrainian-controlled territory. As this information spread, Ukrainian media outlets joined the offensive, not with weapons, but with sarcasm. National broadcasters aired side-by-side comparisons of Russian and Ukrainian footage, exposing the inconsistencies. A popular Ukrainian commentator quipped live on air, "Apparently, Russia's army has learned video editing faster than river crossing." The humor stung Moscow. Within hours, Russian officials began backpedaling. Pro-war bloggers, once cheering the victory, quietly deleted their earlier posts. State media outlets edited their headlines, changing "liberated" to "entered combat near Kherson." But the internet never forgets. Screenshots, videos, and mirrored copies of the original propaganda flooded online archives. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian General Staff released drone footage taken 2 days after Russia's announcement. The drone panned slowly across Karantin Island, calm, silent, and empty. No trenches, no equipment, no Russian presence. The only visible flag was the Ukrainian one, fluttering over a weathered outpost. International analysts reacted with disbelief and ridicule. The BBC Verify team, Reuters Fact Check, and Bellingcat all confirmed the hoax, citing timestamp data and visual mismatches. Even neutral observers began questioning how Russia's massive information apparatus could stage such an obvious lie. The event became symbolic, a moment when propaganda imploded under the weight of evidence. Within the Russian military community, however, the embarrassment cut deeper. Soldiers on the front lines, who risked their lives daily, began venting anonymously online, frustrated that fake victories were being celebrated while real ones went unnoticed. The credibility gap between field units and Moscow's media handlers had become a canyon. By the end of the week, Russian state television had quietly moved on to new topics, burying the story as if it never existed. But the damage was permanent. In the age of satellite eyes, AI verification, and instant fact-checking, the Kremlin's oldest weapon, deception, had finally turned against itself. The Kherson hoax wasn't just a failed lie, it was proof that Russia's war narrative had reached a breaking point, where fantasy could no longer keep up with reality. When the Kherson Island hoax finally unraveled, the fallout inside Russia was seismic, not because of what it revealed about the battlefield, but because of what it revealed about the system itself. The illusion that the Kremlin's propaganda machine was invincible had been shattered. What began as a simple stage victory spiraled into a national credibility crisis, with the effects rippling through Moscow's political elite, its military command, and even its loyal media voices. Inside the Kremlin's information command center, frantic meetings were held. Internal memos leaked by opposition journalists described officials demanding to know how such a low-quality production could have passed review. One aide reportedly shouted, "We staged a war movie and lost the sequel overnight." For a regime obsessed with control, being mocked globally for fake footage was an intolerable humiliation. It was no longer about the war, it was about saving face. In the days that followed, pro-war influencers who had amplified the fake victory were quietly silenced. Some received sudden visits from the FSB, while others found their channels under review for misinformation. Ironic, considering they had been repeating official statements. Meanwhile, Russian soldiers at the front began sharing private frustrations through encrypted apps. "We fight for real, but Moscow celebrates illusions." The divide between the reality on the battlefield and the fantasy on television had become impossible to ignore. Internationally, the hoax had devastating consequences for Russia's diplomatic credibility. Western outlets, already skeptical of Moscow's claims, began openly mocking Russian press briefings. European ministers cited the Kherson incident in parliament debates as proof of Russia's disinformation warfare against its own people. Even nations that had remained neutral began questioning the Kremlin's reliability. In information warfare, reputation is a weapon, and Russia had just shot itself in the foot. Ukraine, on the other hand, capitalized brilliantly on the scandal. Its Center for Strategic Communications turned the exposure into a psychological offensive. Through memes, viral clips, and expertly timed media posts, Ukraine reframed the narrative. Russia was no longer the menacing aggressor, it was the global laughingstock. Western think tanks compared the event to a digital Stalingrad, where propaganda finally met its match in transparency and open-source intelligence. By the end of the month, the Kherson hoax had faded from Russian headlines, buried under new distractions, but the scars it left on the Kremlin's image were permanent. For the first time in 2 decades, Putin's government had lost not just a battle, but the control of the story. The war of images and perception, the invisible front, had exposed the truth. Russia's empire of lies was crumbling under its own weight. And in this war, the most dangerous weapon wasn't artillery or drones. It was the truth itself.